Not all fish food is created equal, and I want to tell you why. What's up, everybody? Ed the Pond Professor here. I am outside our beautiful koi pond, and I want to talk to you today about some really important stuff. We want to talk about the ecosystem philosophy. We want to talk about the morphology, the understanding of the fish itself, and then we want to talk about the necessary nutrition for these amazing animals. And we're going to work backwards. We're going to use biomimicry as our model. We want to understand what they would eat in nature, and then we're going to work with the top manufacturers in the world to actually create a groundbreaking food source that's going to take your fish to the next level. Coming to you today from our studio, which is located at Aqualand, our corporate headquarters. And I'm talking about a really important topic here today. I want to talk about choosing the right fish food. Now, it may seem super simple, right? You go to a pet store, you go look and you have a whole big line of fish food there, but they're not all created equal. And what I really want to do is kind of give you some of the background, why things are created the way they actually are and what the benefits of all of that are. So I always have to start all of my presentations, all of my talks out with this. I have to talk about the ecosystem concept because you're thinking differently. So when you talk to a fish person, they focus on fish, which is great. Ichthyologists, you can get multiple PhD degrees just in ichthyology, which is the study of fish. But in my opinion, you're kind of missing the boat. What we really need to do is look at things from a holistical standpoint. So we have to take everything into consideration. So this was actually a groundbreaking paper that was created by Stephen Forbes back in 1887. He did a paper called The Lake as a Microcosm, and it kind of shook up the scientific world because up until this point in 1887, there were a series of specialists out there. You had ichthyologists, herpetologists, entomologists, all these people that took all these really specific disciplines and they focused just on that one item. But what Stephen Forbes did was he wanted to look at a lake. And actually he did the study right here just north of us in central Wisconsin. He was actually born here in Illinois. But what he did was he wanted to study this lake system. And what he started to find out very quickly was he couldn't understand the fish without actually understanding where the actual fish live from a geographical standpoint, how much sunlight came in, what the bottom benthic sediments of the lake were like, what the runoff is like, what type of insects live in it, what does the fish feed on, what feeds on the fish, etc. So you can see this is a highly interactive system, and he came up with the word. I don't know if he actually coined the term directly or not, but he's considered one of the fathers of ecology. And ecology in general is one of my favorite disciplines because you have to think about all these different components. So I'm a big root word person. So when you look at the name or word ecology, it is used widely throughout the world. People are talking about ecosystems and ecology because that's what we live in. Our Earth system is a massive ecosystem. But the root word of ecology starts from eco or oikos, which actually means home. So in Greek, it means home. And ology is the study of. So ecology literally means the study of the home. Now, what we're going to talk about today specifically is going to be about koi fish and goldfish and pond fish and things like that. But we have to understand that they're one part of an actual functioning ecosystem. So we really have to understand it from a holistical standpoint because that fish is suspended in this aquatic medium and it's interacting with the entire ecosystem on a daily basis. And then we come in as these fish owners and we just want to throw fish food in there and everything and have them interact with us. But this fish food is not a treat. The fish food is meant actually for the sustenance of the fish, and we want to make sure we give them the best quality possible. So we have to understand actually what this fish actually looks like and what it actually is. So a carp, Cyprinus carpio is the common carp. There has been a slight shift in the ichthyological world when we talk about koi. That's not really the common carp. It's actually the Amur carp, which comes from the Amur River, but they're very similar. So I always like to do my research on things. So this is a Department of Zoology kind of breakdown of what actually a carp is and what actually they would feed on. And I think this is really important because, as I mentioned, you go to find fish food and you're going to walk into a store and you're just going to see bags of stuff. Why is it even relevant? So what we want to do is actually understand the biology of the fish first and understand what it actually would feed on in nature. I think this is a really critical component. It's often overlooked, unfortunately. So if you looked at the normal dietary needs of this fish and what it would actually feed on in its river habitat. Again, I mentioned the Amur carp, which is kind of the ancestry of the current koi. They live in the Amur River, which is this riverine system is a massive river. So there's going to be mud flats, there's going to be deep water, there's going to be shallow gravel areas, there's going to be areas with aquatic vegetation, and there's going to be other areas that are loaded with all types of aquatic insects and different types of life. And these fish are going to migrate around according to the different times of the year to actually find the necessary sustenance for themselves. Now, if you look at any type of an animal, we have to understand the biology of it, and I'll show you a quick picture of what that fish actually looks like. But koi carp species are benthic feeders. It says right here, Department of Zoology, these are benthic omnivores. We are omnivores as well. That means we don't just eat meat, we don't just eat plants, we eat a mixture of both of these. And it's because of that mixture of both of these, we need our food sources to actually reflect that. And it depends on, obviously, everybody's genetically slightly different, and we're going to need varying amounts of all these different things. But we have to understand they are omnivores. They need a mixture of protein. They need all the different vitamins and minerals that are going to come from a wide variety of different types of aquatic plants, as well as algae and all the little benthic invertebrates, which I love talking about, all those little things that crawl around inside of the mud and on top of the rocks and things like that. That is a really important food source for these animals. So what we want to do when you start thinking about designing a fish food for something, which is kind of a unique concept unto itself. So you're designing something, a food that is going to take this animal to the next level. So not everybody's going to compete at the All-American Koi Show or All-Japan Koi Show, but we all want our animals to be healthy, and we want them to live for many years. And koi could live for decades. They could actually live for centuries if they're cared for properly. So what we want to do is think about all those different things, and they're going to all need different types of food, not only at different times of their lives, but also seasonally. Here in the Chicagoland area, we're in the upper Midwest, our seasons are going to fluctuate all over the place. So we have to understand the biology of the fish to actually make sure that we're giving them the right food at the right time according to the right water temperatures. So again, it sounds complex, and what I want to do right now is I just want to break all these different things down so you actually walk away with a solid understanding of why we do what we do, why we created the fish food the way we created it. And again, it's the bigger piece that I want all of you to walk away with is this fish is not a solitary animal inside of a pond. The fish is one of the elements inside of this aquatic ecosystem. So you have to think about things a little bit differently. And I'm going to talk about that throughout this entire presentation so you have a really good understanding of what actually this means. So back over to my Department of Zoology kind of breakdown. You know, when you look at these koi, they're going to find invertebrates and things that are living down in the bottom mud and in the sediments. They're going to eat insects and crustaceans. And I actually thought this was kind of interesting. If you follow along on here, it actually says fish eggs, which I've seen. The fish have, during spawning, they're going to go around and eat the majority of the eggs, but they also say fish remains. So they're almost like a detritivore as well. So that means they're going to eat detritus and dead stuff in the bottom of the pond. But I actually have seen that myself. It's not too common. I actually remember in my previous pond, I had a baby bird fall in the water and the fish literally devoured it. They ate this entire bird because they are meat eaters. They're opportunistic feeders. So we have to think of them like that. So we have to give them the necessary protein as well as all those different micronutrients and things like that to go through the entire system. So when I'm talking about the different types of fish that are out there, over here on my one side I have the common carp. Then we have Cyprinus rubrofuscus. I can never pronounce all these scientific words even though I'm a biology guy. Cyprinus rubrofuscus, and just because I don't use them all the time. But it is also known as the Amur carp. You can see they're very similar to each other. Biologically, they are almost identical. There's going to be subtle variations in between them, but they're going to have the same lifestyle. Again, mostly benthic feeders. So that means they're feeding on a wide variety of insects as well as remains of other animals that can fall down in the bottom of the pond. I think those things are really important to remember. So back to creating this food product, fish food, creating the perfect food that's going to take our fish not only to create them healthy and strong, but actually allow them to be vibrant. We purchase our koi fish because we want those vibrant colors. I actually just returned from the All-American Koi Show, and I tell you what, it is unbelievable. I've been to Japan, I've seen high quality fish, and when you see them in person, it is unbelievable. And a lot of that is genetic, obviously, but you can have a genetically gifted organism, and if it's not fed properly, it's never going to reach its full potential. So we want to make sure that we give it everything that it needs. So high quality ingredients are the number one thing. I want to make sure that all of you walk into a fish store and you actually start to read ingredients. My background being in zoology, I actually studied a lot of anatomy and physiology, and actually I was going down a pre-med track for a very, very short time, but my love for animals overtook all of that stuff. But you have to understand biology in general. So just like us, we have to take care of our bodies and we have to find high quality ingredients. And when you start looking at the ingredients on things, it's actually eye-opening and it's shocking. Because a lot of this stuff, there's tons and tons of fillers that are actually added into any type of food for pets, for people, you name it. And it's because it's cheap. What we want to do is get away from that. I know it costs a little bit more money, but you've spent probably thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars on your aquatic ecosystem. And then you're stocking it with all these beautiful fish. So you want to take that next step and you want to give them the necessary nutrition so that they could thrive in that type of an environment. So you want to look at the fish food ingredients. The first thing, in my opinion, that should be on the list is going to be a protein base. And I'm not talking about a plant-based protein. I'm talking about actual protein that is derived directly from herring, anchovy, mackerel, shrimp meal. You pay more money for that. If you've gone to the grocery store at any time recently, look at the cost of beef or chicken or fish. It is at an all-time high because it's clean sources of protein. It's exactly what we want to feed to our animals. So we want to have a pelletized version that's going to have the necessary amount of protein. Now, different types of fish foods are going to have different percentages, and that's going to change throughout the season. So during the main months, during the growing season, when the water's warm, you're going to want to give more higher protein food because that's going to help to pack on the weight and pack on the musculature that you're looking for in your fish. But you have to be conscious of that stuff. Actually, I'm going to back up one slide over here, which I missed, was that word right there, the genus Cyprinus, poikilothermic. I think that is also a super, super important thing about understanding your fish. Poikilos, again, the root word of that, if we break that off, that means variable, varying. Thermic is heat. So poikilothermic means this animal lives in a varying heat type of an environment. The animal itself, the temperature within that animal is going to vary according to the outside temperatures. This is really, really important, especially in these northern climates, which I said I'm part of. So when the water temperature is 45 degrees here in Chicago, the temperature of that fish is going to be 45 degrees. So might not sound too complex, but when you talk about the digestive system of an animal, when their temperature is 45 degrees, they cannot break down protein. Proteins and fats and things are complex molecules, they're complex compounds, and it's hard to break those compounds apart unless you add a catalyst. And a catalyst is basically going to be heat. So the warmer the temperature is, the easier it is for them to break down those proteins and fats and things, and they could utilize that. That's why cold water fish food, which I'm going to talk about separately, is super, super important to have the right types of easily digestible nutrients inside of it that's not going to cause a problem for them. The last thing you want to do is cause a problem early on for your fish. So you want to stage all those different compounds and fish feeds throughout the entire system for the entire season. So again, it's a very well thought out process, just like an athlete would come up with a plan and say, this is what I need throughout my training regiment. So again, a poikilothermic animal is going to have a varying body temperature, and I think that is a very critical component. So main ingredients, when you're trying to pack on weight, you're looking for a high protein feed, 35, 40% or greater. So that means you're going to have that 40% ratio of protein that's going to really pack on the muscle. Just like any athlete would be taking lots of protein to gain musculature, it's going to be good for their overall body. But because they're omnivores, you don't want 100% protein. These are not sharks. They don't eat other fish and they don't feed on pure protein. They're omnivores just like us, so they need a balanced diet. So you want the protein, you want the fats. You don't want too much fat, but you still need fat because those amino acids that are actually coming from the fish, whole fish specifically, are really, really important because there's lots of vitamins that are actually fat soluble versus water soluble. So you have to think of all these things to make sure all those nutrients and vitamins could be assimilated throughout the entire fish. And again, those are very important things. And again, all this stuff is going to be starting out with that whole fish. We actually work with the largest aquaculture fish manufacturer in the world. They actually create this fish food. They have it dialed in. So they understand the assimilation of the proteins and the different ratios of all these different pieces that are going to go into place. And I think that's an important piece. A few other things that I think are kind of often overlooked. I talked about those fish being benthic feeders, and they feed on insects and crustaceans and things like that. One of the important compounds that is found in the cuticle, that exoskeleton of those animals, of the arthropods, is a chitin shell. So chitosan is actually put into our fish food because it's one of the components that is found in their normal fish feeding habits. So again, these guys are going to feed on all that stuff. So we want to make sure that we mix all those different things in. Not only is chitosan an important part, and it's actually found in their normal fish food, but it's an important supplement. People actually utilize it as well. It's a very, very important polysaccharide, which is a type of simple sugar that is utilized in a wide variety of different types of supplements for people as well as animals around the world. The other thing that we're looking at is we want to have stabilized vitamins. I mentioned just a few seconds ago that amino acids and fatty acids and things like that are very important because there are certain types of vitamins that are fat soluble. A lot of other vitamins are actually water soluble, one of them being vitamin C. Vitamin C is super, super important for your fish, just like it is for us from an immunological standpoint. This helps to build a solid immune system. But vitamin C degrades very, very, very quickly in water. So when you're feeding your fish, and if they don't eat it immediately, if you don't have a stabilized multivitamin, all that stuff gets leached out into the water and it's basically lost. What we want to do is, again, take it to the next level. Have a stabilized multivitamin that's going to hold all that good stuff inside of there, but it will be broken down and assimilated once it goes through the gut system of the fish. So we want to be conscious of all those things, which actually brings up another very important point. And I'm going to actually grab the bag of fish food while I'm just talking about this right now because I think it's kind of relevant. So this is actually one of the bags that actually we create. So I'm not trying to do a big sales pitch, but we put a lot of thought into creating our ecosystems as well as creating the food that is going to sustain the aquatic life inside of it. And again, little things like this. This is just a package. And the reason I grabbed it instead of talking about it, because you can see this package is vacuum sealed. It's actually a foil package as well, so it does not allow oxygen inside of it. It doesn't allow moisture inside of it. And the reason we do that is because of the vitamins and the minerals, and all of the stuff inside of here is actually natural whole ingredients. If the bag is full of air, the stuff is starting to degrade. At least this would. If it's actually a really fake food that you could actually leave out in a jar and it doesn't break down by itself in 10 years, it's something you should not be giving to your fish, to your dogs, to your cats, to yourself, or anything. We want to use whole ingredients. That's why this is vacuum sealed, because it is actual proteins that are inside. There's actual minerals and there's vitamins and things like that. And if left out to the outside atmosphere, they're going to start to break down. They're going to oxidize. Moisture actually is a big problem as well because it's going to leach out all those minerals. So having a vacuum packed bag is actually really important. Again, little things that 99% of the world would never even think about, but there's a reason behind all of these different steps that we've taken into consideration. Now, once we have all of the different types of proteins, high quality feeds, the fish meal, etc., the next step we actually started to think about and take into consideration is actually the microbiome. You probably hear about this all the time now. It's actually very, very popular throughout the health industry right now for people. We're starting to do more and more studies about the internal stuff that's actually happening inside of us and how important it is actually for the whole system. So we have a symbiotic relationship with a wide variety of different microorganisms that live inside of us. These microorganisms are responsible for the breakdown of everything that we eat. But not just the breakdown of it, they have to break it down into usable compounds that could actually be absorbed through our intestinal system. And this is actually what creates a normal, healthy, functioning body. It's the same exact thing that we're thinking of. So what we've done is we've actually added in different types of probiotics and prebiotics. So again, I love doing research on things. According to the National Library of Medicine, probiotics and prebiotics are an important part to create an intestinal microbial balance. And these are things that we don't really think about too often, because if you feed a food to any type of an animal. And again, I'm going to shift for a second. I'm going to talk about horses. My wife we have a few horses at home. They could founder, they can get bloat, they can get sick just by actually feeding on actual natural grass, which you would never even think about. Until I had these animals, I had no clue. The horse is an herbivore. It should be able to eat whatever grass it wants. Well, not all grass is actually created equal. The grass that we have here in the Midwest has higher sugar content. So that sugar content, when these animals eat it, especially in springtime, when you have all that fresh new green growth popping up, is very high in sugars. So what's going to happen is it's going to ferment inside of them, and they could actually get sick. So this is actually things that you have to think about with your animals. Again, I'm going to shift. I'm talking about horses right now, but it's no different. We think about fish and you're like, oh, I'm just going to throw this fish food in there. Well, your fish food could actually react badly inside of them. By mimicking what they would normally eat in nature, you can't go wrong. So we're putting all these different blends of things together, but we're actually adding some different types of probiotics and prebiotics into the mix because they're going to help to break things down. Now, Bacillus subtilis is widely found. We actually add it into the fish food, and the reason is very, very simple. Bacillus subtilis is actually going to help to break down proteins. But it doesn't just break them apart, it allows it to be fully absorbed into the fish. So now when you have a 40% fish feed that you're giving to your fish and you want them to pack on that weight, when you have that little probiotic and prebiotic mixed inside of there, it's going to break that stuff down more efficiently inside of the fish so they could actually assimilate more. So that means your fish are actually getting more nutrition from every ounce or every gram or however you want to break it down. For every cupful of food that you're putting in, they're actually getting more out of it. And it's because of that symbiotic relationships. Again, it's simple things, but you have to break all these different components down and understand ecology and understand about the actual fish and where it actually is found and figure out how all these different things actually work together. And that's when your fish are going to be the happiest. Just like our horses, when they're running out in the field, they're going to be happiest when they're in that natural, actual environment. So again, creating the right environments for the animals. The other thing that we're going to actually add inside of here, one of those probiotic and prebiotic compounds is Bacillus subtilis natto. This is actually found in a lot of fermenting foods. Eating yogurts and cheeses and wines and fermented things is actually very good for us because it helps that microbiome. It creates the right environment inside of us, which is extremely important. And the other thing that is often not thought about is when you have a mixture of different things inside of you, microorganisms, bacteria, viruses, etc. They're all fighting for something. So when you have that healthy microbiome, it helps you stay healthy longer and stronger. And it's because there's competition. They're going to outcompete the bad bacteria and the pathogenic bacteria, which actually makes us sick. There's a battle happening on a microscopic level in us, on us, around us on a daily basis. All these things are fighting for control of the system. So we want to make sure that we stack the deck in our hands. We want to make sure that we add in those right probiotics and prebiotics to create the right environment to outcompete the bad stuff, outcompete the pathogenic bacteria. Again, it's right here, National Library of Medicine, prevent pathogenic bacterial infection. These are important compounds that we actually add inside of it. It'll help aid into the digestion processes, stops the bloat, stops all those different inflammation issues that are going to occur. It's not just people that those things actually occur in, it's all life. So when you start adding in things that you can't understand and read the ingredients of, and you can't even pronounce it, just like I'm stuttering with some of the scientific terms here, and I'm a science person. So when you can't read all that stuff, it's like, my gosh, what are we trying to do with our animals? It should be very simple. The main ingredient should be very obvious. Very clean proteins, and then work your way down through the line all the way from there. And I think those are really important components to be thinking about. I mentioned it earlier, not only are we looking for happy, healthy fish that are going to be growing, going to resist infection, but we want those vibrant colors. That all-American koi shell that I just returned from, unbelievable. Just the sharpness of the colors is incredible. And it's not just the genetic component. So again, genes play a lot into that, but you have to feed them properly. You have to have the proper micronutrient balance, the right vitamins, the right minerals, the right stabilized vitamins that could actually do that. Now, increasing that red and orange color is fairly simple. So adding spirulina, which actually, again, I actually take that as one of the supplements that I utilize on a regular basis. That's a great phytoplankton that is found, and it's at the basis of the food chain. So it's very, very clean, it's very, very stable, and it's very sustainable. So adding that spirulina is actually going to increase that, along with krill meal. So the krill meal, we're getting these things from Hawaii and from Norway. So from these actual areas where you have an abundance of these natural food sources, these things are getting actually mixed into the food. So you get those really bright, vibrant reds and oranges. And then the tricky one is actually going to be that white coloration. So the white coloration sometimes tends to bleed into the other colors. So we want to have that really nice, clean, sharp edge. And the only way to do that is having that right mixture of those stabilized vitamins and minerals. So that's the only way to do that. And actually, the manufacturer that we work with that does the aquaculture, they actually work a lot with the sushi industry, with sashimi specifically. So having that nice, clean type of fish and having those vibrant colors, again, it's very important, but it's also means it's very, very healthy. Let's shift gears. Let's go back over, again, talking about different types of fish foods, the general staple food, the color enhancing food. Now I want to talk about that cold water fish food. I mentioned here, it's actually cold. It's at the very early time of spring here outside of Chicago. So we have to be taking our water temperature. I mentioned it, poikilothermic. Those animals, they're going to be the same temperature as the outside environment. As I mentioned before, that means they cannot break down and assimilate heavy amounts of protein. So what we want to do is give them a fish food that has a higher amount of carbohydrates, which are more easily broken down by the digestive enzymes inside of their bodies. Those carbohydrates specifically are going to be wheat germ, which is a staple in actually the fish food marketplace. So whenever you're looking at a cold water fish food, make sure it has that wheat germ right at the very top of that. The other thing that I think is often overlooked this time of the year is talking about the ecosystem concept and philosophy. We have this big bloom of algae usually in springtime. And it's because the biological filters are not functioning, the water temperatures are more conducive to algal growth, etc. But algae is an often overlooked source of food. Let your fish go in and start grazing on all that stuff. You should never be doing water treatments or any type of algal control early on in the season that's going to eradicate algae, because that's a normal, natural, healthy source of food for your fish. Because it's not just the algae. Remember, on the outside surface of that algae is what's going to be a periphyton or a biofilm. So that's going to have all types of other things and insects and small zooplankton and stuff like that living and crawling all over that algal mat. So those fish are going to come in and they're going to feed on all that stuff. And that is an incredible way to jumpstart the entire biology inside of their system. They should be feeding naturally on that algae first. That's going to allow the digestive system to start working. Then you could actually start feeding your fish more. And again, that's very temperature dependent. You're going to start to see them grazing around. Algae is a very, very basic sugar. So it's basically a very, very simple glucose compound. So it's going to break down very, very easily. If you've ever harvested algae out of your pond, it's mostly water. I mean, it's actually going to break apart very, very quickly. But again, don't be tricked by that. It actually packs a lot of nutrients inside of it, which are really important for your fish because they've actually been in a state of torpor all winter long. They've been in a suspended animation process. They're not really in a true hibernation, so they kind of swim around. Their biological processes are very, very slow this time of the year, but they still need to start eating at some point. So this is going to be an important way to jumpstart that. And I'm going to go outside in a little bit. And we're going to actually show you exactly what we're going to do. We're going to take the temperature of the water, and we're going to actually see exactly when it's right to actually feed your fish. Early spring here in Chicago, and you may wonder when to start feeding your fish. Well, it's actually kind of interesting. Fish are cold water species, which actually they're known as poikilothermic. So that means they have a varying temperature, and that is in a direct relationship to the water temperature. So what we need to do is actually check the temperature. And the reason being is very, very simple. When the fish is cold, they cannot break down proteins because there's a complex biological reaction that actually occurs inside of the intestines of these fish. When the water is cold, that entire process is greatly reduced. so they cannot physically break down the protein in most fish foods. So what you want to do is you want to feed them a fish food that's high in wheat germ, so that's why you're going to go in with a cold water fish food. So the number one ingredient in cold water fish food is going to be wheat germ, which is more of a carbohydrate. It's a simple carbohydrate which will break down more easily inside of them. The other thing that we want to do is we want to double check that temperature. For this project, we have a remote thermometer set up as we speak, and it's giving me real-time temperature, 47.8 degrees. That is well below the number of 50. We want to make sure we have consistent 50-degree water temperature in order for these fish to thrive. So I'm going to do a series of simple tests. One of them I'm going to do right here in front of you. The others I'm going to actually do back on my laptop presentation because these were tests that were done previously. But what I want to do, I'm going to take a volumetric measurement. So I have a 1,000 milliliter beaker right here. I'm going to take some of our premium staple fish food. I'm going to do a volumetric test, but what we have to do is we're going to measure everything. So we're going to turn on our little scale here. Make sure we have that. We're going to zero it out. Got a glare on there. So go to 0. Okay, so we're back at 0 now. So we've taken out the weight of the actual container itself. Now we're going to fill this container up to an equal amount. All right, everybody's got to watch me to make sure that I'm doing this properly. So we got 1,000 milliliters filled. So now what we want to do is weigh this. And again, these are simple things, but it comes down to money. It comes down to you're paying for the high quality ingredients, so you want to get the most for your dollar. So what we're going to do is weigh this, and if I have that, that says 450. This is in grams. So 1,000 milliliters is equal to 450 grams of high quality food. It's got that mixture of protein. This particular one, it's got a 32% minimum crude protein. We also have some of that fat mixture, so that is very important. And then we have the breakdown of all the different other compounds inside of here. One of the things actually I didn't mention, actually I just saw it here on the label, phosphorus. It says right on there, phosphorus, 0.6% minimum. It's an important element, obviously, for all of us. We all need phosphorus for our bodies, for our immune system, for bones, for cellular metabolism, etc. So phosphorus is very important, but it also feeds algae. So ideally, you want a right balance of phosphorus inside. You don't want too much. And the reason being, if your fish doesn't eat every single pellet, and all of a sudden that floats away and starts to degrade, that phosphorus is going to become soluble. It's going to be released into the aquatic ecosystem. So uneaten fish food is actually a source of algal blooms because of the phosphorus component that's inside of it. So we want to make sure you don't want an abundance of phosphorus, you want to have the right balance. So you want to think about that ratio between the fat and the protein, etc. So this has only got 0.6%. I've seen a lot of competitive stuff out there, and again, I'm not talking about names, but just thinking of these things that are 1% or greater. That's a significant jump in the amount of phosphorus going in, which could impact the water quality. So thinking about that ecosystem concept, you can't give your animals something that's not going to impact the surrounding environment. This is going to become waste. So as they digest it, this is going to become waste. And I'm going to show you some of those studies that were actually created, but you have to be thinking of all these different pieces. It's easy to not think about it when you talk about fish because it's soluble, kind of disappears, it goes into the filters, you barely see it until you do a major cleaning of your pond. I'll go back to my horses. Inside the stable, their waste is going to add up very, very quickly. So you have to be conscious of all that stuff, and you have to create an environment that could actually handle all of that waste. And again, that's an important part of all this. So I said we have 450 grams. So that's a good amount of nutrient-dense food. It's going to give us a lot of nutrition for our dollar. All right, we got our beaker, zeroed it out again. 1,000 mils, same exact thing. Let's fill that guy up. This is one of the leading competitors out there. 1,000 mil. Put it back on. And we are at, wow, it's actually lower than I thought it was going to be. Our competitive one, it's 149.7, but we'll round it up to 150 grams. So this is a third. So for the same volume, and again, the reason that's important, most people actually feed fish with a cup. I personally do. I'll grab a handful or I grab a cup, and that's the volume that I'm feeding. But with this, you're getting a third of the actual nutrition, but you're still paying for this giant container of food. So you see these bags out there, not all bags are the same. So you have to think about volume, not just volume, you have to think about the weight, the nutrient density, the mixture of different components inside. I'm not trying to knock any competition out there. It's just unfortunate people don't understand the differences. And that's the whole reason I'm here, is to talk to you about the difference. And because I'm an animal person. My degree is in zoology. I fell in love with zoology and the study of ecosystems in our world because I want to make the world a better place, and I love the interaction of fish, and I want to have the healthiest animals possible. We spend a lot of time, money, and effort right here at our very own office at Aqualand, where we have, I don't even know how many hundreds, if not thousands of different types of animals, from fish and turtles and snakes and lizards and all types of stuff here, because we're all animal lovers. So we want to create something that is going to allow these animals to prosper and flourish for many, many years to come. So again, I know it can be expensive. So when you're thinking about these things, make sure you make the right decision. But when you're paying for something, make sure that you're paying for what you actually are going to get. You want nutrient density. You want to have a nice, dense material that is actually going to be feeding the nutrition and the health of your fish. So now let's go into the next testing phase. We're going to talk about a little bit more of our fish food analysis process and some of the R&D that went in, but I do want to kind of stop again really quickly. We just did our volumetric test to talk about the nutrient density, but you have to understand what that nutrient density actually is. So that goes into reading the labels. I mentioned it early on in the discussion that you have to understand the high quality ingredients and what you should be looking for and what we're actually modeling it after. These benthic organisms, these koi fish, they're omnivores. They need that mixture of these different compounds. We want to have those right mixtures put together. So let's see what it actually looks like when you read it. So on the back, again, this is a requirement for any food supplier out there. So you're going to see your list of ingredients. The very first one on our fish food here is going to be fish meal. So that is made from those whole fish, derived from whole fish. So it's going to have all the essential fatty acids. It's going to have the protein necessary, exactly like these animals would be grazing on and feeding on in nature. So fish meal is going to be the most important thing, and it's also the most expensive because it is a pure, clean protein source. Now, some of the other competitive analysis out there. So two of the other top ones, and I kind of find this unfortunate but very fascinating. One of them has their first listed item is corn flour. And then it goes into fish meal. So corn flour is going to have the highest percentage of stuff, of nutrients and compounds and fillers inside of there. The next one is actually wheat flour. Again, you're getting what you pay for. So you want to have that fish meal, which is that natural food source. It's going to have the highest nutrient density for your fish. So it's going to give you the greatest value for your dollar. The other thing that we want to look at, you're going to start reading it from the left to the right, and it's going to go through. So fish meal, wheat flour, and shrimp meal. And then we also have that chitosan, we have the fish oil. So then it breaks down into all those other different compounds. These are all whole ingredients. And then you have a guaranteed analysis. Again, these are important little things to look at. Crude protein for this particular one is 32%. For most of the fish that I'm working with, I'm typically between 30 and 40% is kind of the target range that we're actually looking for. Then we have a percentage of crude fat. We mentioned that was very, very important just because of the fat soluble nature of a lot of vitamins and minerals out there. You have fiber, you have a moisture content, calcium, phosphorus, vitamin A, vitamin C, vitamin D, vitamin E, the breakdown of all those different things. Some of these are fat soluble, others are going to be water soluble, which is why we have them in a stabilized type of an environment inside of the food. That phosphorus one, do not overlook that. Again, some of those competitive analysis I was looking at, they had 1% or more on that phosphorus level. There's only a certain, we need minute amounts of that stuff, and that's because it's not normally found inside of the aquatic ecosystems. So we have to actually add that in to make sure that they get the proper nutrition for that bone structure and for the cellular activity inside of them. So some of the further fish food analysis that we have here, I think this is a really, really good test that we worked on with our manufacturer. So we did a laboratory test. Just like any type of a scientific study, you want to have specific things that you're going to be measuring against. So we have measurable items. So we have this lab test. We have feeding 3 times a day for a period of 4 weeks. You could extrapolate it out, obviously, once it goes beyond that 4-week period. We have 20-gram fish by 10 of those fish. So we have 10 20-gram fish. The filter is located on the top, and we have 150 liters of water. So the fish excrement, I think this is very, very important. So here we have a control food without probiotics. So if you really look down inside of here, you're going to see some of that fish waste down in the bottom. That's going to come from indigestible compounds. It might come from the fillers that are inside. I'm speculating at this point, but it's something that was not assimilated into the actual fish. So this is just a waste product. Thinking about that ecosystem concept, if we have high amounts of unused stuff inside of the ecosystem, something still has to get rid of it. So we want to be able to break it down. So we want to have microbial activity and things like that living inside of the gravel beds, inside of the actual system that could actually break that down, and or it will have to be removed at some point. So thinking about that amount of waste is very, very important when you're designing a feature. So the amount of waste that's actually created. So here we have our food, and with those probiotics that I talked about earlier, the Bacillus subtilis, which is important to break down those proteins. So this is going to help to assimilate into the flesh of the fish. So this is very, very important. So when we have the proper mixture, look, I mean, the bottom of this, we don't see any of that buildup of excess waste in the bottom. So that means the fish are utilizing all of those compounds internally. And I think that's a really important thing to be thinking about when we're designing and creating these systems. So it's not only designing and creating, but it's giving them the right food, because that's going to impact the water quality in the system. You can't take one piece without impacting another. So an ecosystem is going to function as well as all the other components inside of it. And fish food, or what you're actually giving to your animals, is a critical piece of this, because we're adding in countless pounds or kilograms on a monthly, yearly basis going into the system, and it has an impact. So here's another testing protocol that we did for the fecal matter from the koi, actually extracted from the biofilter. So this is the one using those probiotics. Now look at this after it actually settles out. So this is the amount of actually waste that is coming directly out of the biofilter. And this is about a third, just by eyeing it. So it's about a third. This one, not quite half, but it's at least 40%, 40 to 50%, 40 to 50%. And that's a significant difference. This is a 4-week test. This is 10, 20 gram fish. You start blowing that out and figuring out the amount of fish food that is going to be used and the amount of waste that is actually created from a giant koi that you're feeding one of these possibly several times a day going into your environment. So that waste is actually going to build up. So you have to be thinking about the impact on the overall ecosystem. So I'm always thinking about how all these different pieces are interrelated together, because that's really what's going to give us the best results that we're actually looking for. And when it all comes down to it, I said it just a few minutes ago, I'm an animal lover. I want to have healthy animals. Tosai fish, these are those 1-year-old and under fish. Nutrition is critical during those early stages, feeding them the right amount of nutrients so that you could actually end up with these spectacular fish that are loved throughout the world.